Hello and welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You may have noticed that I've been gone, and I have been, but I was busy working on the Paralympics and the Olympics, and even got the chance to go to Paris. But more about that later. I had a brilliant time, but I'm really excited to bring back the podcast. I have loads of athletes and coaches lined up, and I'm looking forward to get stuck in over the months ahead. I'm Orla Keeling, and what I want to do is to go beyond the highlights and the big days to find out what it really takes to make it to the top of your game. I'm going to talk to people about their passion, their challenges, and the mindset that drives success. Okay, delighted to be joined by Mr. Eamon Devlin, a man that I've been able to pick the brain of for, I think, nearly a year now, Eamon, since I reached out to yourself online. Give us your elevator pitch to the listeners who don't know who you are.
Hello, thanks for the opportunity. Although picking my brain, I wouldn't have taken me too long. So I from Armagh, Crossmaglen originally. I escaped the Troubles in '96. Went to London, became a lawyer. Had a very fortunate career in finance. Then realised that wasn't the right thing to do. Left finance, had a breakdown, fell into psychology, fell into half times, and now I help teams at half times.
That's quite a journey. I do want to ask, because you mentioned to me before your experience as a coach and as a player, you never liked halftime. So is this like, something you always wanted to go into?
I've always kept a list of things for the last 10 years of things I'm not very good as a coach. And every year that list got longer. And on that list from very early days was half times. I just never liked giving halftime talks. I never liked as a player either. But my real trigger into halftime was actually through a story with my daughter. We were living in Switzerland at the time. Zoe, who was 9 years old at the time, 10 years old. She's playing for the local soccer team, and this team wasn't doing very well, getting beat, 9-0, 12-0, and one game they got beat 24-0. And the more the team lost, the more the coaches shouted at the kids. And this 24-0 game, I actually said, I'm going to time how long the coach speaks to the players post-game. And it was 9 minutes long. And we walked home to our apartment, and my daughter's always said, "I'm done." I said, "What do you mean?" It's just, I can't take it anymore. I can take losing games, I can take conceding goals, but what I can't take is a coach making me feel bad about myself. So she left. Because she was crying, I was crying. And I remember I was still a lawyer at the time. I remember thinking, there must be a better way of communicating with players. So that's the reason why our business is called Minute 9, because, yeah, for that reason.
The thing that struck me there was what you were saying about even writing down things as a coach that you weren't very good at. Where did that piece of curiosity come from your coaching?
More just actually from my dad. Actually, he wasn't really a football coach. Just he'd always keep a list of things to get better at, and so he had it in business. So I kind of stole it from that idea. I mean, I still haven't. I mean, this actually just explain before we went live, but it's the first year I'm not involved in a team, so the team doesn't have to suffer to my talks this year. So that but I still keep the list of things I'm not very good at. I just think it's a healthy thing to just to be reflective of what I'm not good at, and I think it's now on 2 pages now, this list. And also quite proud of it, because I think if you think there's nothing on the list, then what a boring life to have. There's nothing else to learn, and I'm well aware that I know very little.
Interesting. So give us an insight into, because pretty much in every sport that there is, particularly field sports and team sports, there is a half time at least. Not equating for other sports that have kind of timeouts or the end of a quarter and stuff like that. But what's the history of halftime? Like, why does it actually exist?
So it's a good question. So I did look at this, and the reason I found is, so in the early sort of 1850s, 1860s, in the public school system in England, so we're all the kind of fancy schools, Eton, Harrow, Radley, so I live in England myself, so a few of them quite near where I live. They used to have each of the posh schools have their own version of football. So if Harrow was playing Eton, then the first half of the game would be on the home team's version of the rules. The game would then sort of stop after 50 minutes, and then the teams would change ends, and the second half of the game would be on the version of the rules of the game of the away team. So that's why you had a first half and a second half. And then about 50 years later, people realize maybe we should give the players a bit of a rest. So the rest point came in much later. I think it was 1871. It was first referenced in the FA football rules. And it's since got longer, right? So obviously in Gaelic and soccer, it's now 15 minutes. And it transpires, it went from 10 minutes to 15 because of media rights.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's only going to, and I think it's only if they bring more in, it'll just be because of commercial opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest is obviously the Super Bowl, right? 32 minutes long halftime. So, I think you'd make a strong case. 50 minutes is too long at halftime. Very strong case.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The commercial element. What from just because the Super Bowl actually wasn't too long ago. When everyone's outside enjoying the halftime show that goes on every year, what actually goes on in the dressing room at halftime during a Super Bowl? Have you got any insights there?
Yeah, I have actually. Yeah, I have. I mean, the most there's actually the 2017. I get my facts right. So it was the greatest ever comeback in halftime. It was 23-3 down. I think it was. I think it was a 20-point deficit. I think. And who was it actually? Bradley. What's the name of the quarterback? Famous quarterback.
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady. So it was his group. Players come in at half time, and the head coach, his first line to the players was, "Take 5 minutes and just rest." So at that point, no team had ever come back from that deficit ever at halftime in the Super Bowl. It transpired that the team actually had practiced halftime the previous week. So they had literally stopped training, and the coach made them walk through everything they would do for those 32 minutes that he knew they were going to have to do a week later. Players didn't like it because they're busy hitting each other and running around, and but I've later had transcripts of players who were in the room that day who said that made a big difference. And I think the coach's line at the end was, "Let's make history, guys." So very calm, no shouting. That period of, they give them, I think, was 5-6 minutes of the players just be alone with themselves. So this idea of just reflecting, taking time. And what the coach is trying to do is, before we start shouting at each other, we need to look at the mirror, gentlemen. Look at our own, including myself as head coach. Like, we need to look at ourselves. And I think that's sort of, that principle we use with our elite teams is, how do you create a system where there's a period of just time to kind of just look at yourself first of all before you start pointing the finger, and that's a real challenge, particularly in football, because emotions are high and the finger pointing happens quickly, usually from the coach. Yeah.
One of the things that jumped out to me when I was preparing for this, and I've my notebook here, questions, and even at halftime, it's I've challenged as well with who actually speaks, and it's like one voice. So by the time you actually get it down to one voice, and it's not three people having three things to say, because the power of three and stuff, people generally won't remember more than that. So if there's three people saying three things, then it's nine things. But anyway, but the thing for me, it's actually managing the emotion, and not only managing your own emotion, but managing the emotions of the group of players. I'm not even talking about the management team. Give us an insight into actually managing those emotions of the players, because you've got so many different groups of players, ones that played well, ones that haven't played well, ones that are itching to come on, ones that are at the end of the bench, probably know they're not going to come on. How do you manage that cocktail of emotion?
Yeah, actually, as part of my PhD, we had an event in Leeds Beckett 2 weeks ago, and we coaches from rugby, from a few of the Leinster coaches came, a few of the Gaelic coaches came, a few of the football coaches came from the Premiership. I think we had 8 Premiership teams there represented. Some of the England coaches came along, and emotional regulation was the number one issue that they highlighted, both from a player point of view and a coach point of view. So taking the maybe coach point of view first, if I may, two things I find most useful in helping coaches sort of, regulate their own emotions is we encourage coaches to kind of, when the whistle goes, they walk very slowly from the dugout or wherever they're sitting or standing during the game. Just walk very slowly, ideally on their own, just to kind of reflect. Just like noticing your steps in the grass, just taking, a walk normally takes 2 minutes to make it 4 minutes. Just like slow it all down. Second thing is we give coaches quite a lot of food. It's not a joke, by the way. We give coaches quite a lot of food to eat at halftime. Because we've realized that there's something called ego depletion happens for most coaches during a game. And that's, if you're not aware of it, it's basically when you're trying to, you imagine you're driving a car, right? You're on the left-hand side of the road. You obviously you want to look at the car in front of you, behind you, but you see the traffic on the other side of the road, the other side of the dual carriageway, but you're trying to block out. But that's actually quite a very draining exercise to do with your brain. And it basically equates to ego. And the same thing happens in a football game or, in a rugby game. You try to ignore what the opposition's doing, the coaches, they're trying to ignore the cameras, the fans, and all that takes a lot of energy to kind of block out the other stuff. And what happens physiologically is that glucose levels collapse. And so we realized that, coaches need quite a lot of sugar. And so we found giving them some food to eat does two things. One, it sort of meets a primary need, but also their breathing has to regulate. In order to eat, you have to regulate your own breathing. Plus, you can't really talk. So it kind of shuts them up a little bit. And it's done in a kind way. And then ideally, the coaches being in their own room, having somewhere safe that they can go. And then lastly, I'll say on the coaches is having a system, having a few questions to work through every halftime. So it's not just like, or what do you think? Or what do you think, Jennifer? It's like, it's a little bit messy, I would call it. Whereas and the questions can be very simple, like, question one, who is hurting us in the opposition? Where are our possibilities of doing better? Where are we doing well? Ideally, the same questions are given to the players. So then on the player side, what we find is just leaving the players alone for quite a long time really helps. For two reasons. One, we find that the players find their own level eventually, particularly if they're left alone. And sometimes it gets out of hand, but perhaps that's what's meant to be. I see coaches trying to go in, it's getting very rowdy next door. Well, that's how they want to behave right now as a team. Maybe that's necessary, right? To have, so one of the things come out of my initial research in half times is players value fellow player feedback just as high, if not higher, than the coach. That's both before a game, in game, and halftime. But once the coach or coaching circus comes in, then player on player feedback effectively ends. And so we would, and the other last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up, is having a very clear time system protocol we find helps regulate people's emotions because people know what's going to happen. It's less chaotic. It feels safe because we've done this, 5 times this season, right? I know what's going to happen next minute. Also, they make it very clear to players what they should eat, what they should drink. So when we do what's called game day reviews, one of the things we look out for is how much food and drink players have at halftime. And we haven't met a team yet who get anywhere near the relevant levels they should be eating or drinking at halftime in any sport.
Okay. Geez, there's a lot there to unpack. The one thing that struck me early on as well was you were saying about the walk. And I think as well, when you see, and I've written down coaching circus, I'm going to rob that term from you, Eamon. But when you see even kind of coaches walking in or even after a game, and I remember I was at a game last year and, the management team were trying to figure out something. They were actually running around. And I was like, this is not portraying confidence to that team. If I'm a player, as you say, just that walk, even if you're down, whatever score it is, whenever sport you're playing, that walk, it's like we're in control. You know, the kind of way it's the perception of for your players. But I remember JJ Redick. It was only during the week he had a clip there. He was talking about post. He was talking to the team post game, and he said before the game when I was going to do my mindfulness, I think, or my breathing before the game, and I was like, wow. But like he's an elite NBA player and is now coaching, so he obviously would have done that as a player probably and brought it into that. But the checklist, I don't know if you read that book. I'm assuming you have.
No, I haven't actually. No, I haven't read that.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I haven't read the full thing, but as you brought up the checklist, it brought to mind. But even when
Okay.
it's interesting, like the amount of things you've touched on there. What's the biggest, like, what was the biggest insight into, like, you developed a lot of things there, but what was the first thing that you found that you didn't realize you knew before?
It's 50 and a half time. The first, well, I'm going to use two. First thing we've really kind of I noticed was the level of anxiety in the room. That is, and so we've done experiments and testing on looking at people fidgeting, eye movement. Eye movement is very reflective of agitation. We just went cortisol level checks, so they're pretty high, particularly in professional football. And so, if anxiety is very high, then ability to focus and listen, diminishes severely. So that was problem number one. How do we find a way, or is there a way, frankly, to lower, to lower the issue of, nervousness or anxiety? And the second thing is this lack of structure. It's like, you know, fair, teams have got, their training schedules. Here's a 2-hour training schedule. It's timed to the inch of its life. People are quite good at now keeping the timings. The meetings are quite short now in football and sport, right? They're all time cut off at the right time. And then at half time is just like, it's just, what's your protocol? So one of the things we look for when we do reviews is it really clear there's a protocol here? Like, can we write it down in a piece of paper? Because we find that just that order and structure is more likely people will feel safer in that space because they know, X is going to happen then. The coach is going to come in after 5 minutes. Maybe the captain goes next door and speaks to the, to the management team. So having this idea of like order, we find that certainly seems to help players feel safer and coaches feel safer.
Mm. How much should players be eating and drinking then at halftime? You mentioned that.
There are. I'm not a nutritionist. If I was, it'd be very, very bad advert for one. So there are recommendations that on UEFA, people can Google it, UEFA guidelines. I think it's 30 grams of protein, but yeah, just double check that. Obviously depends on the weight, size of the player, but you know, there are online metrics you can use to work out, if it's half a liter or whatever it is, but there is every player, he's kind of taking their sport seriously should, and also to get players to experiment, like what feels good. But it's clear that going back to the anxiety level, if you're anxious, hunger is not on your list of priorities. You're worried about being subbed, missing a goal, fans throwing things at you. There's other things. So you have to be trained. So on the eating and drinking, we found, and this is by chance actually, to be fair, it was actually one of my team members came up with this idea, is giving players gels and foods to eat at training. Like, we need to practice this. If it's not natural, then we need to practice it, right? We need to learn this behavior. So and so now we find that, teams we work at them much, they're definitely going up in terms of fluids and solids, for sure.
It's interesting as you say it, like practicing halftime, practicing what you're doing, practicing what you're eating or drinking. We practice all of the skills in the game, but we never actually practice the biggest thing that we can control in the middle of a game. Like there is no other time for us to control a game. Thanks to Jason Sherlock entering the pitch 90 times in an All-Ireland final a couple of years ago, there's no more Irish
Yeah.
getting GAA.
That's right. Yeah, there's yeah, it's the only. I'm drinking Gaelic, right? When you look at this, obviously, say the pitch, it's it's what 30% bigger than a football pitch, right? Soccer pitch. So it's a huge area, and um, yeah, and actually we did some tests on what players can hear as well. From the coach from the sideline, it's not very good.
Mm.
So you're right, but probably is the only opportunity to kind of really, and actually on that, we've done tests on how much players can remember. So we did a test with a professional football team over the summer last year. It wasn't a competitive game, it was a challenge game. or a friendly game of saying football. Manager spoke for 3 minutes. Well-known manager, I thought reasonably well-structured speech. So you actually got a pretty high score from us. We then polled some of the players before the beginning of the second half. Tell me what Coach Orta said to you a few minutes ago, and the results were appalling. And that was only 3 minutes. That's 180 seconds. So in football now, coaches are averaging 7 minutes, 10 seconds speaking. So 7, probably 140, it's 1.5, it's a lot of words, and 1,500 words.
And you can imagine, like, if the lads from that team didn't remember much from 3 minutes, how much is being brought in at, 7 minutes.
Yeah, and that could have been a perfect experiment because we were told why we're there. And that's even like people are probably, oh, hang on, someone might even ask me what they're going to ask me, right? So probably that's even, so if anything, it should have showed more of an awareness. And then you add in the complexity of languages. So we were discussing we work at Gaelic teams and football teams. We've seen some really big differences, and mainly because of language. So actually our most recent Premiership client we just realized, got 19 different nationalities. Out of 25 players, 19 nationalities, 12 different mother tongues. So, yeah, for any Gaelic coaches listening, you haven't got that problem to deal with, most likely.
I want to ask as well around, I'm always fascinated by improving individuals in a team environment. So when we talk about halftime, giving individual instruction to players at halftime, and I never know how I feel about substitutions at halftime, because you see the halftime show at halftime, particularly in the junior B football match, and the lads are out kicking a ball. But if they're not in the dressing room, then they're not getting the instruction, and if they're to come on, and then do you give the instruction to the subs in front of the group, or like how do you balance that as well?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I mean, we actually have there's a team of 8 of us now at Minute 9, and we've a split group, to be honest with you. Just half of the group thinks subs on the pitch, the other half is no, in the dressing room, all as one clan. My personal view, for its worth, I think it's probably benefit for the subs to be outside doing something that's more practical. The idea sort of if obviously they're forward, it's shooting. If they're in the back, it's more defending. Funny, very recently we just advised a team that we went into on a game day situation, and it was very clear the subs were just kind of ignored until like the moment came, right, Orla, you're coming on. Like before that, not an acknowledgement even existed really. Like and the team the team met 3.5 hours before kickoff. It's the throw in. So like that was probably 5 hours really they've been together before someone said, oh hello, So actually in that example, we actually got the one of the selectors to go and speak to the subs on the pitch at halftime. Now between you and me, we're trying to get that assistant manager or the selector not to be speaking much at halftime. It's not when we just find this guy a job. And actually, his job is, and actually, I think it's working out pretty well. So the subs get a little mini talk from the number 2, from one of the selectors. So so they feel perhaps more, special and hopefully information that's useful.
Yeah, it kind
And
of
so that,
it kind of links into what Sammy Lander was saying before in the coaching group around. He did a webinar, it was fantastic, around substitutions and actually being out on the pitch, and instead of just doing a kick around, it's actually position specific coaching that you're doing pre-game and half time. So never actually thought of that in terms of your number 2. And as you say, it gives them a job, so they're not talking over you. At half time, do you then, like, when you don't play, let's say for example you have things to work on from the first half, like how do you balance, like, is it 50-50 in terms of first half we did this versus second half we're going to do this? Or like, I just think that's a fascinating, another trying to combination or formula you're trying to come up with.
So when you analyze the tapes, the ones we've seen, we've seen, a few now the last year. A lot of the discussion, mostly from coaches, is basically a commentary in the first half. it's kind of and it transpires, frankly, an inaccurate summary. Like people's memory is very challenged, right? In stress moments, very challenged. The angle of the pitch, where you're standing, all these things are very makes your ego depletion. All these things factor into, putting your memory at, so compromised memory. So one of our principles we have in our little team is the focus should be on the second half. Like the review meeting happens, guys, on Tuesday night. So the protocol we sometimes use the teams, though not the one we probably use most of it. The idea of this, in the second half, what do we stop doing? In the second half, what do we start doing? In the second half, what do we continue doing? SS&C. But the key to that is really let's focus on the next 35, 45 minutes or 30 minutes. Because if you get into a commentary, people will generally go to what hasn't gone well. So in football, the amount of feedback that's negative is I think it's 78% now we see. So there's a whole, actually, I had a very nice debate with a manager very recently. And we went through what sort of clips they show at halftime. A 9 out of 10, they're stuff the team's not doing well. 9 out of 10. And you kind of wonder, what's the point of that? Because the players know, like if they know, these guys are professionals, they've played a few games, right? They probably know the game pretty well. We can make, I think it's a very philosophical question. Like, what's kind of the point pointing out people's errors? I mean, this is when we can't have the time to fix the technicals, right, of it. So, yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that feedback is going to change, very. I think it's changing. Some teams maybe do the ratio 1-to-1, right? Like, right, let's pick out one good clip, right, where Orla did an amazing run, another clip where, I don't know, Eamon was out of position. So having that very dedicated ratio of, I don't want to say good and bad, but positive and stuff to work on. But people's actual behavior at halftime is really focused on what's not going well. And inevitably that, I don't think that does much people's self-confidence.
And I think as well, it obviously depends on the group and the players, but I find at times when they're really driven and they're really motivated, they nearly focus on the negatives and they just need someone to remind them of the positives. So if you're coming in and giving them all the negative again, so you've got a double negative because they're killing themselves inside, and then you're pointing the finger and saying all this stuff. The other thing I was thinking about just there was, is there a scope? And obviously within a management team, it would depend on a lot of things, but to actually like go around, not exactly maybe individually or even pair them up in groups and, rather than, if you're trying to limit your team information to 3 things, like what I hate is there's 3 things and 3 things are said about 3 and you call out different people. Why I hate that is, as a player, I would hate to be called out in front of my teammates. So do you think there's scope to be, for example, I was on the management team, you were the manager, and I was there with another 5 people, and our job was at half time, the first, say, 5 minutes after we take our 4-minute walk to the dressing room, to give individual feedback to as many as we could. Would that work?
It can do. I think it depends on the environment. I think we step back for a second. I think one of the things we often ask coaches when we're designing half times now is, do you want your players to have a voice? And you might think it's a silly question, because we've realized actually a lot of coaches don't really. They don't really want the players to have a voice, because we always say, look, I think we can help design systems where the players speak more, but that comes at a cost, coach. And that cost comes at your control. It's not possible to have very very upstanding players with big voices and you have full control. Those 2 things are not compatible. So if you want to stay fully in control, then just keep talking. That's your choice. That's fine. But we do see this some particularly in professional football. It's like, oh well, I've heard this stuff now. I need to involve these players. They'll go, anything from you guys? Anything to add? And before the player, or maybe someone who does speak, the coach will jump back in again before the players even finish their sentence. I've literally seen it on tapes. And then you wonder whether the players don't say anything. You haven't even let Orla finish up in sentence. So I really think, and I don't know what the right answer, but I think it's a philosophical question a coach needs to consider. Do you want the players to have a real voice? Because say that means I think a system that works quite well, and I'm going to divide it now into male, women and men's game. In the women's game, I've seen a good system where before the game, players are buddied up to a buddy. So that you've got a buddy which is allocated by the captain an hour before the game. So let's say you're with Jennifer. You two have a chat about what you both want to focus on yourselves on the game. So you tell Jennifer, I'm going to focus on my driving the ball, into the opposition square. And she tells you, I'm going to focus on my near hand tackle, wherever the kind of technical skill is. Then at half time, you've got 2 minutes together, the two of you. And you feedback on each other. Obviously, you got to be quite close together on the pitch. That I found good that seems to work very well with two teams we've seen working with, where it's not doing in front of the whole group. And then an alternative to all of that is allocating somebody from the back line or the forward line to say, look, at today we want you, Orla, to feed back to the coaches on the 1 point you want to change from the defense. So in advance this is coming, right? You're not just suddenly picked on in front of the whole group. And then to make it a bit fun, then you go, right, when you've done it today, then you pick the next player to go. And you make a bit of a laugh, right? So then we find that player then really is tuned in both halftime and during the game, because they know at minute 10 at halftime, the coach is going to point to you and go, what have you got for me today? And that's it can be a way of like sharing leadership too. And
Yeah, I really like that buddy system. I think that's really clever. Other thing I want to ask about as well, I was at a brilliant coaching conference last week in Meath. Dan Glynn, I think is his name. He was basically talked through exercises for raising your heart rate and calming your heart rate. And it got me thinking about this chat as well. And I'll send on the stuff to you. It was absolutely brilliant. But managing, like, for example, that Patriots team with Tom Brady, let's go out and make history. And the opposite side of that, when you're on, you're up 20 points and you're trying not to lose it. Just interesting in managing the staying grounded when you're up really high and the hunger when you're really at a deficit. Hunger is probably the wrong word, but the resilience to kind of fight back.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I've got a smart answer for you. What we try and get coaches to do is when they walk into the room at halftime, is they try and take up to 5 seconds just looking around the room, looking at the eyes of the players in front of you, if they're looking at you, or just looking at their posture and going, honestly, coach, what's the best thing you can do today to help those players in front of you? And you kind of have 3 options broadly. Do nothing, which I always say to coaches is an option. Do you have to intervene today? Do you think that your intervention is going to help the players and going to give them a better chance of getting a success? Which very few do, by the way, because culturally people need to speak, but it's very effective. And I heard one very recently in the county game, where the managers walked out, just said it wasn't good enough and walked out. Very effective. You could argue. Secondly is what's the second one?
The kind of when you're on top.
Yeah, so when you're top, I think you're just looking at you either give more information or it's emotional. So do nothing, more information, or helping with either emotions go up or down. I think if you're winning a lot, then I think you got to really assess whether or not do you think the team is getting too cocky here, and you don't know that you know that yourself. Hopefully, as a coach, you know their behaviors. But then setting them targets, right? We'll look at right. Okay, we are up here in this match. And there's some coaches who have in their scoreboard inside at every half time it's 0-0. Because the objective at every half time is to try and win the second half. Ours, if you're minus 20, plus 20, and it's 3 each. So that can be quite a useful mindset to think about. We're always trying to win the second half. And then linked to that is giving your team targets, right? So if you're having an quote unquote an easy day out, then let's say let's go 5 minutes today in the second half and not concede. We'll see how that goes.
Mm. Mm.
But yeah, it is challenging. And actually, we did something with Leicester Rugby last week, and the coaches were asked what sort of half time do they feel most comfortable in, right? Are you, and the three kind of options: winning a lot, drawing, losing a lot. Have a guess which one coaches felt most comfortable in, you think?
Losing.
Drawing.
Okay.
And actually, for me, that strikes me is that the coaches then thinks it's about them, because that's the one they think they can influence the game. But like on a surely in a normal world, you think like you want to be winning a lot at halftime. Like I would anything as a manager, right? Because I higher chance of winning. But I think it's an interesting insight that a lot of coaches think the halftime is about them, and that they think, oh, if it's drawing and I say a few good words, I can change it here. Whereas, really, the sort of logical position would be to want to win a lot, be winning a lot at halftime.
Yeah. Yeah, I said losing because you can give that any given Sunday inches speech, claw your way back and all this jazz.
Yeah. But again, that's because, if you look at the ask coaches what's most important at halftime, they'll say tactical changes, so the halftime team talk. If you ask players, the tactical talk ranks number 4 in the important things at halftime. Food, water, rest, feel togetherness. Those are all more important needs than listening to some words from a coach. So that you can see there's one of the big challenges of halftime is what the coach wants to do, or what he or she thinks is important, isn't the same what players think. And that's the real challenge, I think, of the halftime break. Is finding a way to marry those two things together if it's possible.
So how do you marry them together? Would you ever sit down a group of players and management and actually discuss halftime?
Yeah, so when we work with when we design a halftime protocol, which believe it or not is quite a lot of work. I know people go, it can't be that bloody hard, Eamon, come on. It is if to do it properly, because every culture is different. We've had ones where in the Middle East where we've got the players praying at halftime. It's no joke. Prayer, everyone's Muslim. We realize, okay, let's get prayer mats out. 5 minutes, everyone prays, and like it's calm, it's beautiful. It looks like them. Players are much more centered, and you got other ones which where it's the players are quite sort of very loud, and they need a bit more controlling. So yeah, but during that process, we insist the players are involved, because ultimately, my personal philosophy is halftime is for players, and I fully believe that as a philosophy. That ultimately the game day, not just halftime, game days are for players. Coaches are there to support. So you're kind of in a supporting actor role, not getting a gong for the lead actor role. And we found the coaches who concur with that philosophy then realize the halftime should be built around the player needs. But if the coach thinks it's about them, then they want the 9-minute speech. And it's very hard to find a reason why that makes sense, Orla.
One of the other things I want to talk about as well was focusing on the actual team versus opposition. And my philosophy would be we focus on ourselves because we control ourselves. We can't control the opposition or the referee or anything, or the weather or any of the other stuff. You can mention them, but focus on yourself. What's your take on it? Interested to hear.
Well, I refer to we would do these sort of game day reviews. We go in and analyze the whole team's communication. So there's usually 2 or 3 of us go in to a team environment, and we kind of analyze communication between the players, between the coaches. We also analyze communication with the referee, with the scoring system. And to be blunt, if there's a lot of chat to the referee or about the referee, then the team gets downgraded in their scoring. And the reason for that is very hard to find. I think it's impossible to find, research or any sort of finding that suggests that being very vocal to the referee helps you. In fact, probably does the opposite. So there's some dressing rooms I know now where referee chat is just banned. I know of a coach not that long ago who was told by the players to shut up because he was talking to the referee. It's like, what you do? We've got, we're down 3 tries. I mean, the referee didn't put the ball on the as far as I can see, they didn't put the ball on the on our own back line, right? I think that was the opposition. Opposition, I'll be truthfully, I've been surprised how little teams top an opposition like. So we've sat through a lot of pre-game meetings now, um, a lot of pre-game meetings, and I've been surprised how little people focus on the opposition. And maybe that's, I don't know, I haven't got any research to back it, but my sense is not enough. I think, like I used to like when I was used to play, not a very high level, but when I did play, I was used to someone like to me, Eamon, you got to watch, Orla's, deadly on the left foot or something, something kind of useful. Um, I do see at halftime very few coaches who are good at guessing what the opposition is going to do, because you have your plan, right? You got your plan for the second half, hopefully, but what are the others going to do next door? Like if you just scored 11 points in the first half, well, there's going to be two defenders in you in the second half. Like statistically speaking, that's very likely you're going to be doubled up. But that probably hasn't been. So I think that could be an element, I think, of analysis could be improved by coaches. Is that very so? That maybe we know you're going to be doubled up. Let's pull you out in the wing now for that reason. Like if they're going to do that, well, let's make sure those two defenders are like away from the so you're not plugging up the middle, so to speak.
The other thing I'm kind of interested in as well is the visual aids, particularly I think when you're going away to a dressing room that you're not familiar with, and bringing the kind of the flags and the photos, and you see different teams with different things, and even I know of teams that have their food table in the middle, and there's people that I know that are kit men and put them out. There's not one thing out of line. Just interested in the visual aids of a dressing room to make it feel, as you say, like I've written that down, what you said about players feel more relaxed and comfortable and together. Give us an insight into, because we know I've heard you speak before anyway about what shouldn't be in the dressing room, which includes the team owner of a professional team that you're working with before. But what's in the room that actually helps on a halftime talk from your experience?
Well, I think it's more about the halftime experience of Colin, just the halftime talk. Yeah, the familiarity is good. I mean, obviously, you've got to have a very careful and caring kit person really helps. I do see, like, generally standards weighting in Gaelic are very high, like club and county. People really care. Well, I give you an example. We did a review for a local football team here who were like, probably bottom rung of professional football, like so like level 4, let's call it. And I remember before the game there was 2 boxes for like sweets for the players, both empty. And I remember thinking that wouldn't happen in Gaelic. I don't think. Like somebody would have spotted it during the week, or someone would have driven to the shop probably during the game to get to fill it up. And that's a professional team, right? And these players get paid. So yeah, pictures of make it familiar. I mean, there's some teams use the Argentinian football team have got the same scent wherever they go around the world. So dressing room smells the same. I think that's an interesting idea. So as soon as you walk in, this feels familiar, and obviously the thing with smell is you can't really turn it off, right? So you can't avoid it. Unlike you just shut your eyes, right? It's slightly more challenging to shut off your nose. I think making this a process. This is probably the bigger thing how it looks. So having the same timing system, whether or not you're home or away. In terms of who speaks, what voices, even the visual aids. Like, give me something that's there's a whiteboard, like Frank, or magic paper is very handy. If you go up in the teacher's room, you write out your 2 or 3 points, then you grab it, take it off the wall, and bring it next door. That's very useful. Saves you having to carry a big, flip chart and banging everywhere, and it's just distracting. Magic papers we find, and it's quite easy to store. Oh.
The other thing I've written down there is halftime experience, not halftime talk. I like that. But I remember in prep for this, generally I try to listen to a couple of episodes that guests have done before if they've been on podcasts. And one of the things that actually struck me was you were talking before about, I think it was an episode I did in December, about preparing for a halftime experience, not a halftime talk. So, and it made a great, the host made a great point. It was like, when do we start thinking about halftime? About 10 seconds after the whistle is blown or before the whistle is blown. So is there scope, do you think, to prepare before halftime or before the game for halftime?
Oh, that. I'm probably going to think I'm not going to say yes, and I'm going to say yes. I so we when we work coaches one-on-one, we try and make sure that the coaches have what we call 4 records in the back pocket. So 4 different tracks they can play at halftime. And then the coach got to work out which of those 4 is most suitable that day. I mean by 4 tracks, I mean like one could be, maybe a very informational heavy halftime team talk. We're having a structure for that. And that structure can be prepared well before the game even starts, you could argue. In terms of order, is it, you do the attacking side first, you do the defensive side first. Having a story, having a story makes absolute sense for a coach to have, because going back into that idea, when you walk into the room and you mentioned you're losing by a lot, you look around the room, if you see a load of literally dejected players, I'd strongly argue, what's the point giving them 5.5 minutes of tactics? Because there's a foundation there, which is there's no belief. So whatever you're going to throw on top of that is just going to disappear into the sand. And so I think there's and that born out of the research we did last summer. When stories are done well, like I'd won from a All-Ireland final actually, and both actually, if you 2 players in All-Ireland final, this particular All-Ireland final, they had the same speech, and both of them said, "Yeah, it gave me the petrol I needed, gave me the fuel I needed to win the game." And that's a story. Another one. A third one is what I call the Control-Alt-Delete moment. So that's when really things just have not gone to plan. And I mean, like, whatever could go wrong, you've had, the opposition had 2 players sent off, but yet they still have, 12 players in attack, right? There's like, Jim McGuinness type situation at the weekend. You're angry with the rules, you're angry with the world, it hasn't gone well. And that moment, actually trying to find a way of actually resetting the game. And so what I mean by that is finding a way of just almost imagining the game hasn't started yet. And to give you a more practical example of that would be getting the players go, right, everyone, just sit down. No tactics today, no video clips. We're not doing the stop, start, continue. Take off your boots, all of you. Seriously, take off your boots. Your left boot, right boot, unlace them. Under your seat is a new pair of Dublin socks. I want you to put those socks onto your feet, take off the old ones, put them on exactly how they should be on your feet. This time, do it properly. So there's no wrinkles. The O'Neill's logo is exactly how it should be on your ankle. Put the boots back on and go, and obviously you do that quite slowly. It take about 2 minutes to do properly. And go, look at, folks, you've done that properly now. Now let's actually start the game of football today. So what you're trying to do is do something which is probably teach them mind off the game a couple minutes. Just try to start and I can't guarantee that it works for everybody for sure. But when we have seen it used, it's been used, I think, to reasonably good effect. So you're trying to get people to disconnect just for a couple minutes from the actual horror story of the last 35 minutes. And it is it's very, if you try it actually, it's like changing your socks, because you're, more than half of your nerves in your body and your hands and your feet. So changing something, drying it is very, it's very, you can change your mood actually very, very, very well. So that's another one could be, not walking in the dressing room, not talking, just not entering the room. Just not entering. Another one could be, if you have got the budget, like changing your entire kit, which England team, actually a lot of teams do now, actually, to change the entire kit half time, but that's not in everyone's gift. So it's those sort of tools available, which, it could be even like, having a plan B, like, you know what, I'm not giving the talk today. My head selector is, just because they think today's the day of a different voice. But all those things need kind of planned, or they need planned. The story needs to be practiced. It does need to be, any given Sunday. I always say to coaches, a really good place to go to is a story about yourself. Not about, Tom Brady or but you. And if you're their coach, and in this world, players don't like you, they'll remove you. So they must like you because you're still there, right? So they trust you. Most likely they trust you. So and a story, and the good thing about a story about yourself, people go, "Well, that sounds very egotistic," but it's that you're just trying to show them what it means to you, and you're not trying to go, you must feel this way, or this is what they did, and you've got to do this. I'm just telling you about my story, like when I was in a situation, or the day I had today, or just something just to kind of take the pressure off a little bit. And the last one I'll say is one of the best lines I heard recently from a coach was, who actually got really high marks from our scoring system, was his first line was, it's actually two really good first lines, I think anyway. People may disagree. His first line is always, ladies, do you mind if I say a few words? First line. Second line then, in this case, was, I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong plan. So if a coach is going in and giving, frankly, more than, and by the way, people talk about 2 or 3 messages. When you really analyze it, it's about 20 messages people are giving. Well, when people say 2 or 3 things, they mean 2 or 3 concepts. But within each of those concepts is about 8 or 9 different messages. So people go, oh, we only talk about the press. Yes, but in order to talk about the press, you had to deliver 6 different messages to people, right? So that's not really, you talk about concepts, not so that is, so that idea of, I think they can be, but all those things need a bit of force, and then the real art of, I guess, is working out which of those records you use. And if somebody, by the way, if somebody finds a record that works in every scenario, please write to me or get in touch, because I spent a whole year trying to find the right one. I haven't found one, but there are records, I think, which are more likely to be successful, but they are different ones. And then the last bit is coach having the courage to do the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. There's so much I could unpack there. I'm conscious of time. So if I'm going to have a very successful team talk now for my next match, it's I deliver 3 things in one voice, limit the people in the room. My number 2 is outside with my substitutions, giving them a little bit of a talk. Everyone is eating, including me. Disconnect their mind from the game. I give them a story and I limit commentary in the first half. And one of the other things which we haven't discussed, but I've saw a team do before, it looked very interesting, and it kind of goes back to that togetherness, connection, even that vulnerability piece from a coach, is breathing together, arms around each other in a circle, just taking a few deep breaths, just to, going back to what that guy said at the coaching conference, if you need to slow down your heart rate, it's doing that, or the opposite, where you have an exercise, what he did with us at the time, to, that exercise to either limit or to decrease your heart rate or increase it. So does that sound like a very successful team talk?
Yeah, very good summary. The only thing I would add, and then the other thing we haven't discussed is smiling. That sounds very obvious, but like when you walk into a room, smile at the players. Like, look, was it the old Barack Obama line? Like, look in the mirror and go, you're gonna just look at them. You can do this. Greg Lincoln, who's a manager of one of the England team, under 16, I think, boys team. He's the thing which I've still done now, which is before he gets into the dressing room to give us halftime team talk, gets out his phone, looks at his picture of his family. There's my 2 girls, Zoe, who's actually now back playing football, and Nancy, who's also playing football, and looks at the phone for 5 seconds, and like really notices like who's it, like what they're wearing, eye color. Okay, they're my girls, names. Okay, that's important to my life. Phone down, walk into the room. And I use that myself. That's fine. I find that a useful way of just, making myself less anxious, because it's a way of comparing, isn't it? Sort of anchoring where you are.
Amazing. I do want to ask one question that I ask every coach that I meet, whether it's on the podcast or if I'm just running by and they're trying to run away from me, and I'm just like, please just answer one question. What is it that separates the best of the best from the rest of the pack?
Yeah, the really, we're very lucky. We work with some amazing coaches in Italy and Spain. So our biggest client is Real Madrid, and I'm amazed how Carlo Ancelotti, particularly, he literally isolates time to learn every week, and also identifying what he thinks they're not good at, and then try to find obviously can't be that good. He found us, but he tries to find good, solutions he thinks will work for that problem. I remember my first meeting with him, I was kind of waffling, and he just said to me, tell us what we're shit at, basically. I was just humble, vulnerable, realizing there's a gap here. We could fill the gap. There's no shame in it. Move on. Gap filled. Next. And then lastly is having. I always say to coaches, if you're going to make a change, before you make the change, sleep on it, and then be prepared to wait for at least 5 games, because we had a. This is a true story. We redesigned their halftime, and the first game was against Barcelona. It was 0-0 at halftime. End of the game, they lost 4-0. I thought, oh no, this hasn't gone well. He's gonna phone it up and fire us. And I remember saying, no, we gotta be patient with changes. And that's really struck at me. So and that's I'm not saying there's nothing to do with art. Like, the point I'm trying to make is, if you make a change, and by the way, anything I said they've made it right for you. If you are making change, whatever walk of what you're doing as a coach, decide it for yourself, commit to it, and then be patient. And then not to make too many changes all at once. One of the big problems we have in our game day reviews, I actually had a coach recently who it's going to take 12 of our changes and implement them for the next game, which was the next Sunday. I thought, wait. You're making too many changes. So half these may not work for you. I don't know. And if you make too many changes, you won't really know which ones are working for you because you've made too many changes. Because it's like, as you well know as a coach yourself, it's a very dynamic environment. It's pulling out what really isolate works. Is, if anyone's got the answer to that question, again, please get in touch with me, because we haven't found how do you isolate what works, what doesn't.
Yeah, I'm already, before we finish this, and I'm conscious of time, I want to ask one question before the sideline 7. If you have to go, Eamon, let me know. I want to get you back on, and I want to see, for half the episode, can we get coaches to email in, or players, their experience at halftime? We can discuss and review them, or scenarios, as you say, and come up with stories for them to use, because I think this is just brilliant. I do want to ask, most memorable halftime experience you've heard from a player that you're willing to share, and it can be either positive or negative, up to yourself. Ideally positive, but up to you.
I'll give one positive, give one negative. Most negative I've heard wasn't Gaelic. It was a team in Ulster, inter-county team, half-time, team losing by 12, team in a circle and huddle. Manager walked in, and he just pointed at the number 8, his own player, midfielder, and says, "You take off your jersey." And the player said, "What?" "You heard me. Take off your fucking jersey." The player had to remove his top, red jersey. He then handed it to the manager. Manager then flung it in the circle in the middle of the huddle. Manager then proceeded to literally walk all over it, trample it, spit on it, and said, "The guy you're meant to be marking, the other number 8, he's walking all over you. Now tell me what you're going to do in the second half."
You were at the point of, you were saying it was his teammate that told you.
Yeah, it was his teammate told me this, and he was livid, like, for his friend who'd been humiliated. And the words of the person interviewed, the player, this number 8, never recovered from that moment. He played after that, but never the same player. As that's one of the challenges of being, some people go, "Oh yeah, but I'm sure Ole can take it right away." Very trouble with that is when the gun comes out, as I call it, people don't know where the gun goes next, though. Like, the manager might have said to go, "I'm going to go after Orla," but you haven't told the players that, right? So, you might think, "Well, am I next for this?" So that this wildfire spreads, like, that's why it's very precarious to kind of to do that. And then I still find it hard to find one better than Joe Kerrin's, where, the 2002 All Ireland final against Kerry. Armagh never won All Ireland at that stage, losing by 4 points at half time. Your odds of beating Kerry in a very good, Kerry team, odds of winning that game probably down at 3 or 4%, probably statistically. when Kernan realized that you walked in the room and go, these guys don't need tactics today. They know exactly what the plan is. They're just not doing it very well, or they've lost belief in the plan. And so, walked in, and got out his loser's plaque, which he got in the previous, in 77, and said, this is what this meant to me. And if you keep playing like this, you're going to get one of these. And I can assure you, I felt like a loser for the last 25 years of my life, and smashed it. And then one of his selectors had a Celtic cross, which he nicked from another county, and just showed the players you can see. So what he's trying to do is really give players, you have a choice now. One of these shiny medals or a plaque that meant nothing. In fact, more than it meant nothing, it dragged me down mentally for 2.5 decades. Lost the game. And three players interviewed that day, and all three of them said, we almost took the doors off the dressing room door. And that's the thing that obviously the coaches, before you even start speaking, how do you want your players to feel when you open the door again, beginning of end of half time? Never mind what you're going to give them information. How do you want them to make them feel? Because you're more of a chance of making them feel differently than you have, what they think about, because it's very chance to remember stuff. But you have a higher chance of making them feel differently and using them to inspire them. That's a really underutilized tool, I would say. Inspiring players is an underutilized tool.
100%. I ask everyone what's the most overlooked or underrated skill, and I think at the moment the one for me is belief in players, is instilling that belief, and as you say, inspiring them. It's probably another similar one.
Yeah, and it's doing it the right way, and it's just going back to that, walking into the room and just looking around, what's the best thing I can do to help these players? Is it emotional? Is it tactical? Is it just shutting up? Those three.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I have to bring this to a close, but
okay.
Eamon, I do want to bring you back on. Sideline 7, going to run through it. Same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Okay. Question 1, what's your favourite quote?
Actually, famous quote with my mum's, which is, just get on with it.
Brilliant. Question 2, best sporting event you've been to?
Sheffield's snooker final. Championship final.
Question 3, biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
Biggest challenge was by far having a complete nervous breakdown, ended up being a trauma recovery center, and finally putting my ego to one side and getting help. That was my biggest challenge. But yeah, once I kind of finally realized, I needed some help, there's really good help available. I was very lucky to get that.
Question 4, what's your biggest achievement to date?
Never getting fired from a coaching job so far.
Very good. Question 5, advice to your 18-year-old self.
Take sport more seriously when I was younger.
Question 6, dream dinner guest and why?
Jerry Adams. Was it worth it?
Question 7, if your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
The second half.
Brilliant. Eamon, looking forward to part 2. Best of luck at minute 9.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, Doc. Thanks, Rob. Very good.